What's up, everybody? My name is Brad, and today I've got another Stephen King book review for you, and I want to talk about The Gunslinger, obviously by Stephen King. This is book one in his Dark Tower series, an epic, sprawling series, sort of his magnum opus, if you will. I'm going to go ahead and read the synopsis to this one real quick, and then give you my thoughts and everything about this particular book. In the first book of this brilliant series, Stephen King introduces readers to one of his most enigmatic heroes, Roland of Gilead, the last gunslinger. He is a haunting figure, a loner on a spellbinding journey into a good and evil. In his desolate world, which frighteningly mirrors our own, Roland pursues the man in black, encounters an alluring woman named Alice, and begins a friendship with a kid from Earth called Jake. Both grippingly realistic and eerily dreamlike, The Gunslinger leaves readers eagerly awaiting the next chapter. So as it says here on the back, this story we're following the gunslinger, the title of the book. His name is Roland of Gilead, and he's the last gunslinger. And gunslingers in this world, they're sort of like medieval knights in a way. They're based off of Arthurian legend. Even their king, way back in the day, his name was Arthur Eld. So they're sort of the heroes, the noble guardians of the realm, but Roland is the last one. Instead of having swords, they have guns, since they're gunslingers, and their weapons, their guns, are their most prized possessions. Just sort of like Excalibur would have been to King Arthur. Roland's pistols, his guns, are his most prized possessions, out of everything that he owns. And in this world, he lives in Midworld, but he's from Gilead in that. And the world has moved on. It's sort of a dying world. And Roland's goal, basically his only objective, the only purpose he has in life is to journey to the Dark Tower, which is basically the center of not only Midworld and his plane of existence, if you will, but the Dark Tower is the center of all of the worlds in the Stephen King multiverse. This series, the Dark Tower, all of the other Stephen King books that he's ever written in one way or another, some a lot more than others, they all branch off and are connected to the Dark Tower in some shape, some way, shape, or fashion. This book, not only this book, but the series in general, is really not like anything else Stephen King has ever written. He's known for a lot of his horror. He's been writing some more sort of thriller, detective type stuff recently. But this, is not that. It's epic fantasy, it's sci-fi, it's horror, it's Western, it's all those genres mixed into one. This first book is definitely more Western than the other ones. And when I say epic fantasy, I don't mean swords and sorcery and dragons, but if Stephen King did fantasy, what that would look like, this is what that is. This is a Stephen King book. But we're following Roland on his quest, his journey to reach the Dark Tower in this first book here. And I love the opening sentence to the book. That's one of my favorite opening lines to any book. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. So we're following Roland through this desert. He's been journeying towards the Dark Tower for, it just says years. We don't really know how long he's been on this quest or journey. And throughout the book, or at least near the beginning or so, we do get some sort of flashbacks to his past and when he was younger, before he was a gunslinger, and how he actually became a gunslinger. His father before him was a gunslinger as well, and we sort of get to see the trials and tribulations he goes through to become a gunslinger himself. But like I said, we're following him to reach the Dark Tower, and along the way, he comes in contact with the character Jake Chambers, who is from Earth. He's from our world. Somehow he has ended up in Midworld, where Roland is from. I'm not going to go into any spoilers or anything, but Roland himself, he's sort of cold and sort of gruff, and can't think of the words, but he's sort of, you know, sheltered and shut off. He doesn't show much emotions, and I like how that played off with Jake. And Jake is a very likable character. He's eager. He wants to know what's going on. He asks a lot of questions. And Roland himself is, you know, he's cool and he's a badass, but, you know, for his character traits, he's sort of unlikable because he is so cold and doesn't show much emotion and stuff. So I really like the play between Roland and Jake. Their characters together, they're very different from each other, not only age-wise and, you know, where they're from and everything, but their characteristics, their character traits are very different. So I liked how they played off each other. And Jake, you know, starts to go on this journey with Roland towards the Dark Tower, since there's no one else around, as they chase the infamous Man in Black. And along the way, we get to meet it's a small cast, but a colorful cast of characters. They go to a town named Tull, which is sort of your typical sort of Western town, and they meet some characters there along the way as they, you know, continue on towards the Dark Tower. I don't want to say too much more about the actual plot of the book. I don't want to give anything away. But the Man in Black himself, he is one of Stephen King's most iconic villains. You might not recognize him as the Man in Black, but he goes by lots of different names, and he appears in lots of other stories that King has written. So he's a really cool villain. He's not your typical villain. He's not just, you know, a big bad out to destroy the world. He has his own goals and things that he wants to achieve on his own. But I don't want to say too much more about it. Like I said, I do want to show off some of the artwork. All of the books, I guess, if there's a mass market paperback version, they probably don't have it. But all the books do have artwork in them. And the artwork is always great. The artwork in this one is by Michael Whelan. And like I said, the artwork is always really cool in all of them. This is where they're up against these slow mutants when they go under the mountain. Roland and Jake. And the last one is, if I can find it, Roland staring out, sort of imagining the Dark Tower there in the distance. But for this book, Stephen King started writing this when he was very young. He was in his early 20s, like 21 or 22 or so. He started writing this when he was in college, and he got the idea from a poem that he learned about through one of his college classes called Childe Roland, and it's C-H-I-L-D-E, which I think that spelling of it sort of means a nobleman or a nobleman before they become a knight. And the poem is by Robert Browning. But Stephen King, he talks about this in the afterword of the book. He really liked that poem. He liked its expansiveness, how epic it was, how broad it was, and he wanted to write something to sort of live up to that poem. So that is where the idea came from. In saying that, you can tell that this is written by sort of an amateurish writer. Not that the writing is bad in any way, but it's definitely not as good as Stephen King has become throughout his career. You can tell sometimes he uses big words just for the sake of using big words. You can tell that, you know, this is a college kid writing a book based on what they tell you how to write in college classes. So some of it was a little stiff feeling. Some points were sort of confusing with the plot, sort of what was going on and stuff. But I did love the characters, and I love the world that Stephen King created here with the lore and the mythos and mythology that he is creating here, you know, that to build up on with the rest of the series. This is sort of the building blocks. You can say this is sort of, you know, him stumbling out of the gates a little bit before he gets his firm footing, you know, to continue the rest of the journey in the other books. This book was okay to good for me. I gave it 3 stars based on those things. Like I said, the writing's not terrible by any means, but it's definitely not Stephen King's best. And this is actually my least favorite book in the series. I've done a video before ranking the books from least favorite to favorite, and I'll put a link to that up there. I don't remember if there's spoilers in that video or not, but I'm sure I said it in the video. But I do know a few people who have read this book, and they just sort of meh on it. and they did not continue with the rest of the series. This is a short book. It's only like 200 pages, just barely. It's 212 pages, and you know, the font is kind of big and it's got big margins, so it's not really a big time commitment. I will say, if you have read this and we're just sort of meh on it, please pick up book 2 and read that one. And I really think that'll change your opinion on it, especially if you like, you know, sort of epic fantasy, sprawling stories, you know, big quest sort of type stories. Give book 2 a shot if you were just sort of meh on this one. I think book 2 will really change your opinion. Depending on what day you ask me, book 2 is my favorite book in the series. It's either that one or the very last book, book 7. It's infinitely better than this one. And I really hope and suggest that if you were just, like I said, sort of on this one, try book 2 out, and I think you'll really love it. And if you don't like book 2, you're not going to like the rest of the series anyway. But at least give book 2 a shot. Even from the very beginning, book 2 is so much better than this one. Book 2 is up here. Book 2 is called The Drawing of the Three, and like I said, it's much more, you know, action-packed, and you know, we get lots more of the world and the characters and new characters, and it's a lot better than this first book. But that's all I have to say about it. Again, this has been The Gunslinger by Stephen King. It's book 1 in his Dark Tower series, sort of his magnum opus. I think, you know, it's his greatest achievement as a writer, this series as a whole. Overall, I loved the series. It was fascinating, it was compelling. It brought out all the emotions. It made me happy, sad, angry, and it was a fantastic series. And this is the stepping stone, the starting block for that series. Like I said, that's all I have to say about it. This has been The Gunslinger by Stephen King. If you've read this, I'd like to hear your thoughts and comments on it down in the comment section below, especially if you've read it and decided not to continue on with the series. I'd like to know why, you know, so we can have a discussion. But please don't put any spoilers or anything down there. The series is too good to spoil anything. But that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for spending your time with me. Again, my name is Brad, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.